I was standing at the check-in desk of what I thought was a 5-star luxury spa, clutching a robe and dreaming of a deep tissue massage, when a hand gripped my shoulder, and a voice whispered that I needed to step away from the counter, because I was technically a missing person. Imagine being told that your daughter-in-law, the woman you helped raise, the woman whose mortgage you've been subsidizing for 3 years, didn't actually book you a weekend of relaxation, but had instead signed papers to have you permanently committed to a long-term memory care facility under a false identity. I stood there in my slippers, looking at a badge instead of a room key, while the detective told me that my house had been listed for sale 2 hours after I was dropped off at this resort. My heart didn't just drop. It shattered into a million pieces right there on that marble floor as I realized that the person I trusted most in the world was currently at my home, probably packing my jewelry into cardboard boxes. Was I wrong for the way I decided to handle the absolute destruction of her life after I found out the truth? Tell me honestly, if you would have shown any mercy, or if you would have done exactly what I did and burned every single bridge she had left to stand on. To understand how a mother-in-law ends up being escorted out of a fake spa by the police, you have to understand the last 5 years of my life, and the way I let Sarah crawl under my skin. I lost my husband, David, 6 years ago, and I was left with a beautiful 4-bedroom home in the suburbs and a very comfortable life insurance policy. My son, Mark, met Sarah shortly after David passed, and at first, she was a godsend. She was sweet, attentive, and she seemed to care about my grief in a way that felt genuine. When they got married and mentioned they were struggling to afford a down payment on a house, I didn't hesitate. I told them to move in with me. I figured the house was too big for one person anyway, and having family around would fill the silence. That was my first mistake. For the first year, it was wonderful. I paid the utility bills, bought the groceries, and even helped Sarah start her small boutique business by giving her a loan that I knew deep down I'd never see again. But slowly, the dynamic started to shift. It started with small comments about my forgetfulness. I'd leave my keys on the counter, and Sarah would gasp saying, "Oh, Carol, that's the 3rd time this week. Are you feeling okay? Maybe we should see a specialist." I'd laugh it off because everyone loses their keys, right? But she wouldn't let it go. She started keeping a notebook of every time I misplaced a word or forgot a neighbor's name, framing it as concern, while looking at Mark with these pitying, watery eyes. She would stage these interventions over Sunday dinner, where the air would get thick with her manufactured anxiety. She'd say things like, "Mark, did you notice your mom left the garden hose running for 4 hours?" When I knew for a fact I hadn't even stepped into the garden that day. It was a slow drip of poison, designed to erode Mark's confidence in me and my confidence in myself. I started double-checking everything. I became a prisoner of my own caution, wondering if I really was losing it. Sarah was like a shadow, always there to catch a mistake that she had usually engineered herself. She even went as far as to swap the labels on my daily vitamins, making me feel drowsy and lethargic, then using that physical weakness as further proof that I was declining. I remember one night, I found her in my office, going through my filing cabinet. When I asked what she was doing, she didn't even flinch. She just sighed that long, suffering sigh she'd perfected, and said she was looking for my medical insurance cards because we need to be prepared for the inevitable, Carol. The inevitable wasn't my aging, it was her takeover. By the 2nd year, the gaslighting became a full-time job for her. I would come home to find the furniture moved slightly, or the stove left on, things I knew I hadn't done. When I'd protest, Sarah would pull Mark aside and whisper just loud enough for me to hear about early onset symptoms and how unsafe the house was becoming. Mark is a good man, but he's weak when it comes to his wife, and he started to believe her. He started looking at me with this heartbreaking sadness, as if I were already gone. Sarah, meanwhile, was getting bolder. She started asking about my will, about the deed to the house, and about simplifying my finances so she could help me manage the stress. I pushed back hard. I told her I was perfectly capable of handling my own life. That's when the spa retreat idea came up. My 65th birthday was approaching, and Sarah came to me with a brochure for the Azure sanctuary. She told me she felt terrible about our recent arguments and wanted to make it up to me with a full week of pampering. She said it was a high-end, secluded resort where they take your phone at the door so you can truly unplug and find your peace. I was so tired of the fighting and so desperate to believe she still loved me that I agreed. I packed my best outfits, thinking I was going to be sipping mimosas by a pool. I even bought a new swimsuit, feeling a rare spark of excitement. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was her way of calling a truce. The morning of the trip, Sarah was oddly frantic. She insisted on driving me herself, saying Mark had to work late. She was extra helpful, making sure I had my medical documents in my bag just in case, and she even bought me a new luggage set. I thought it was a sweet gesture, but looking back, it was just an easy way for her to ensure I didn't take anything that could identify me as Carol Miller. When we pulled up to the facility, it didn't look like a spa. It was a sterile brick building with high fences and a keypad at the gate. My gut twisted, but Sarah just smiled and said, "It's a private wellness center, Carol. They value security and privacy for their VIP guests. It's meant to keep the paparazzi away from the celebrities who stay here." I felt foolish for doubting her. She walked me to the front desk, kissed my cheek, and told me she'd see me in a week. As she walked away, she didn't look back once. She practically ran to her car, her tires screeching as she pulled out of the driveway. I stood at the desk and gave the receptionist my name, but the woman looked at her screen and frowned. She said, "I don't have a Carol Miller here. I have a Rosemary Higgins checking into the long-term cognitive care wing. The papers were signed by her legal guardian, Sarah Miller, this morning." My blood turned to ice. I started to argue, to tell her there was a mistake, when I saw two orderlies moving toward me with a wheelchair and a look of practiced, clinical pity. They weren't looking at me like a guest. They were looking at me like a problem to be managed. That's when the detective stepped out from the side office. I thought about all the times I had defended Sarah to my friends, all the times I had silenced my own instincts to keep the peace. I felt a surge of adrenaline that replaced the fear. I wasn't an old woman with a fading memory. I was a woman who had been pushed to the edge and had finally found her footing. When we pulled up to my driveway, my heart nearly stopped. There was a for sale sign in the yard. Not a coming soon sign, but a sold sticker already plastered across it. The audacity was breathtaking. She hadn't even waited 24 hours. I walked up to my front door and tried my key. It didn't work. She had already changed the locks. My own key, to my own house, was useless. I didn't knock. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a warning. I went around to the back, where I knew the sliding glass door had a faulty latch I'd been meaning to fix. I slid it open and walked into my own kitchen. The smell of expensive coffee filled the air, the kind I only bought for special occasions. I heard laughing from the living room. Sarah was sitting on my velvet sofa, the one she knew I loved, drinking a glass of my most expensive wine. She had a laptop open and was talking to someone on the phone. I stood in the shadows of the hallway and listened. She was saying, "Yes, the closing can happen as early as Friday. The owner is moved into a permanent facility and won't be returning. We're looking to move the remaining furniture by Wednesday. It's a clean break. Honestly, it's a relief to have her settled where she can't hurt herself anymore." I felt a calm I can't describe come over me. It wasn't anger anymore. It was a cold, calculated mission. I walked into the living room and said, "I hope that wine is as good as you thought it would be, Sarah, because it's the last thing you're ever going to drink in this house." She jumped so high she knocked the wine over, staining the white rug, a rug she'd always complained about. Her face went from ghost white to a sickly green. She started stammering, "Carol, what are you? How did you?" The spa called and said there was an emergency. I was just coming over to check on things. I held up the brochure for the memory care unit. I told her, "The police are outside, Sarah. They know about Rosemary Higgins. They know about the forged power of attorney. And they definitely know about the sold sign in my yard." She tried to play the victim, crying that she did it for my own good, that I was losing my mind and she just wanted to protect the family assets. She actually had the nerve to say, "Carol, you're confused. This is exactly what the doctors warned us about." I just looked at her and laughed. It was the most liberating sound I've ever made. I told her that the only person who was confused was her, thinking she could outsmart the woman who built the life she was trying to steal. But then Mark walked in. He had been at work and had no idea about the spa or the sale. When he saw me, he burst into tears, and when he saw the detective enter behind me, the reality hit him. He looked at the sold sign through the window and then at his wife, and for the first time in his life he saw her for exactly what she was. He saw the predator behind the concerned daughter-in-law. Sarah tried to grab his arm, spinning more lies, but he shook her off like she was covered in filth. I didn't stop there. I didn't just want her arrested. I wanted her erased from my life. I had my lawyer on the phone within the hour. Because the house was in my name, and she had attempted to commit fraud. I had her removed from the premises immediately. I watched from the porch as the police escorted her to the cruiser, her designer heels clicking on the pavement she thought she owned. I filed for an emergency restraining order. But the real revenge was her business. I had the records of the loans I had given her, which she had never reported as income. I had been meticulous with my banking, even if she thought I was forgetful. I reported her to the IRS for tax evasion and contacted the suppliers for her boutique, informing them that her primary investor, me, was withdrawing all support and filing a lawsuit for the return of the funds. I contacted the local news too. I didn't want this swept under the rug. I wanted every person in this town to know what Sarah Miller was capable of. By the end of the week, Sarah had lost her home, her husband, her business, and was facing multiple felony counts of fraud and elder abuse. She was a social pariah. Her friends in the community dropped her faster than she'd dropped me at that facility. Mark moved out too. Not because I kicked him out, but because he couldn't look at me without feeling the shame of his own silence. He realized he had been an accomplice through his inaction. He's in therapy now, and we're slowly trying to rebuild, but the trust is a fragile thing that might never fully heal. Sarah tried to call me from her lawyer's office, begging for a plea deal, asking me to tell the police it was all a big misunderstanding for the sake of the family. She had the audacity to use my grandson's name, saying he needed his mother. I told her that he needed a mother who wasn't a sociopath. I told her that she stopped being family the moment she tried to steal my name and lock me in a cage. I sold the house myself a month later. I didn't want to live in a place haunted by her shadows or the memory of my own husband's trust being violated. I bought a beautiful condo by the ocean, somewhere where the sun actually shines and the doors have very, very good locks. I spent a lot of money on a top-tier security system and an even better lawyer. I realized that being nice and generous to people who don't respect you isn't a virtue. It's a target on your back. I learned that the hard way, but I'm still here to tell the story, which is more than she wanted for me. I spent my 66th birthday alone on my balcony, watching the waves and feeling the weight of the last few years finally lift. I'm not Rosemary Higgins. I'm Carol Miller, and I'm more in control of my life than I've ever been. The moral of this story is that blood doesn't make you family, and concern is often just a mask for control. If someone starts questioning your reality or trying to manage your life against your will, believe them the first time they show you who they are. Trust your gut, even when the people you love are telling you your gut is wrong. I almost lost my freedom because I wanted to be a good mother-in-law and avoid a confrontation. Never again. If you were on my side and think Sarah got exactly what she deserved, make sure you hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. And if you want to hear more stories about people getting the ultimate revenge on toxic family members, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a drop. I want to hear your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments. Did I go too far by reporting her to the IRS and ruining her business? Or was that just the icing on the cake? Should I have given Mark another chance to live with me? Or was it right for him to face the consequences of his weakness too? Let me know your take on this. I'll see you all in the next story.